In the quiet town of Willow Creek, nestled among whispering pines and mist-laden valleys, there lurked a darkness unseen by most. It was a darkness that crept along the edges of the town's consciousness, weaving its tendrils through the fabric of everyday life. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Neighbors exchanged pleasantries, children played in the streets, and the local diner bustled with activity. But beneath this facade of normalcy, a sinister presence prowled the shadows. It began with whispers, murmurs of strange occurrences that seemed to defy explanation. Pets went missing without a trace, their owners left to wonder what had become of them. Strange symbols appeared overnight, etched into the bark of ancient trees and scrawled on the walls of abandoned buildings. As the whispers grew louder, so did the unease that settled over Willow Creek like a shroud. People began to lock their doors at night, casting furtive glances over their shoulders as they walked the darkened streets. But no one could say for certain what they feared, only that it seemed to lurk just beyond the reach of their understanding. It was on a night much like any other that Sarah Jenkins found herself walking home alone. The moon hung low in the sky, casting long shadows that seemed to dance in the flickering light of the street lamps. As she made her way down the deserted sidewalk, a chill wind whispered through the trees, sending shivers down her spine. Sarah quickened her pace, her heart pounding in her chest as she rounded the corner onto her street. Just a few more blocks and she would be safely home. But as she passed the old abandoned house at the end of the road, she felt a sudden sense of dread wash over her. A faint light flickered in the darkness, drawing her gaze to the upstairs window of the decrepit building. For a moment, she thought she saw a figure standing in the shadows, watching her with eyes that gleamed like polished obsidian. But when she blinked, it was gone, leaving her to wonder if it had ever been there at all. With a shudder, Sarah quickened her pace, eager to escape the oppressive silence that seemed to press in on her from all sides. But just as she reached the safety of her own front porch, she heard the sound of footsteps echoing in the night. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest as she strained to listen. The footsteps drew nearer, each one echoing like a death knell in the stillness of the night. And then, just as suddenly as they had begun, they stopped. Sarah held her breath, her pulse racing as she waited for some sign of what was to come. But all was silent once more, save for the distant cry of a lone wolf in the night. Trembling, Sarah reached for the doorknob, her fingers fumbling in her haste to escape the darkness that seemed to envelop her. But before she could turn it, she heard a voice behind her, soft and cold as the grave. "Going somewhere, Sarah?" She spun around, her eyes widening in terror as she came face to face with the figure from the abandoned house. It stood before her now, tall and menacing, its features obscured by the darkness that cloaked it like a shroud. With a strangled cry, Sarah turned and fled into the safety of her home, locking the door behind her with trembling hands. But even as she sank to the floor in relief, she knew that the darkness that had descended upon Willow Creek was far from over. For lurking in the shadows, hidden from sight but never far from the minds of those who dwelled in the town, there was a murderer among them. And as Sarah huddled in her home, praying for the dawn to break and banish the darkness once and for all, she knew that the nightmare was far from over.